Welcome to the RE Human Layer Security podcast, the show that flips the script on cybersecurity. I'm Tim Sadler, the CEO and co-founder of Tessian, and in each episode, I'll be interviewing IT and business leaders about why we need to protect people, not just machines and data, to stop breaches and empower businesses to achieve their missions. Welcome back to another episode of the RE Human Layer Security podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jon Oberheide, the co-founder and CTO at Duo Security, a security solution that provides two-factor authentication, endpoint remediation, and secure single sign-on tools for the modern era. He's here today to talk about what he's been up to and share his thoughts on human layer security and securing people in the enterprise. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you, Tim. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, so hopefully we can have some fun.
So this is the first time that we've had another security founder on the RE Human Layer Security podcast. And I can't think of anybody better than yourself, Jon. Could you maybe start by introducing yourself, just telling us a little bit about what you've been up to over the past 12 years at Duo?
Yeah, so I was a co-founder and CTO at Duo Security, and change is in the air right now. I just announced that after 12 years, I'm actually leaving Duo, but extremely proud of what we built there. And for better or worse, the need, the value prop that we can offer is still so prevalent. You know, we're protecting 30,000 organizations, rounding $500 million in ARR, but there's still literally millions of organizations that have this set of problems that we can help with. So when we started the company back then, 2009, we had this mission of democratizing security. How can we bring advanced security technology to organizations of all shapes and sizes? So that mission continues, and we have much more to go.
I love that mission of democratizing security, and I think there are parallels between Duo and Tessian. Jon, could you take us back to 2009? Tell us how Duo got started. How did you start working on the problem that you went on to solve with the company?
Yeah, I will claim in hindsight, there's a lot of startups these days that are the democratizing X. We thought we were clever at the time back in 2009, but it was really that observation that so many organizations were underserved. As Wendy Nather, one of our advisory CISOs, eloquently stated, a lot of organizations are at or below the security poverty line. They can't even afford to protect themselves. They don't have the budget. They don't have the staff, the expertise, the resources to adequately protect their organizations. And what we saw at that time in 2009 was that there was a very broadly observed by adversaries that this was happening. And so attackers had started to go down market, that instead of attacking, JP Morgan Chase that's investing $500 million in cybersecurity, they could go after and attack, 100 mid-market companies in very scalable methods, primarily email-based phishing and password theft, credential theft, and still have the same kind of returns from their sort of adversarial activity. So we set out and we said, this is where we're seeing attacks shift. And at the same time, back in 2009, it was, shortly after the iPhone had launched in 2007, Android has just launched. AWS was in its early days of basically just S3 and EC2. Office 365 still wasn't GA'd. So it's very early days of cloud and mobile. And we saw all these organizations start to struggle with those, IT megatrends that really changed how people accessed applications in their enterprise and changed how IT was architected and therefore changed how security was architected. So, we started off as, hey, we're going to deliver a really simple, easy to use, easy to manage multi-factor authentication service. Honestly, starting the furthest down market we could, starting with SMB. But we always had, maybe foolish ambitions that we were going to build something much bigger, much broader, what people would call nowadays, zero trust or beyond corp, around how do you provide, easy and secure access to any application.
And I love that story because I think it's contrarian to what most founders would be told in building security, which is, focus on the enterprise first and then work your way down. Did you get that advice, or was SMB kind of always in your mind, hey, we don't want to be the security company that's providing the sort of super expensive elite products and elite tools. We, as you say, right, we want to democratize security. Was that in the company DNA from the beginning?
Yeah, Doug and I's background, we kind of came from the offensive side of things. So we were used to, leveraging, advanced and lead techniques to break things. And we had just seen how kind of poorly performing and poorly behaving so much of the security industry was from a vendor perspective. There's a lot of snake oil, a lot of, promises that were not kept or under delivered on in terms of serving customers, and, just wrong ways, in our perspective, of serving the customer, of building a company, building a team and culture. So we had a pretty big chip on our shoulder to say, hey, like, we're going to build a very different kind of security company. And so it wasn't unexpected that we were, doing things a little bit different from the outside view, and a lot of those things were intentionally different. And we did get that early feedback of, one, like, why are you selling down market? The security buyers are, Fortune 500, and you see a lot of security companies where that's all they'll focus on. They'll sell to Fortune 500. They'll, even if they have success, they'll saturate that quickly. They'll try to move down market, which is much harder than moving up market. And, just sell into those traditional verticals and, buyer personas and use cases. And we thought there was a much broader opportunity that wasn't kind of being contemplated by analysts, by, industry veterans. We thought there was a much larger customer base to serve, simply because those attackers were going downstream after smaller and smaller organizations. And there just had been no solutions that were designed, from ground zero to address the needs of a 10-person company or a 50-person company in which you have one person who's handling IT and security and help desk and infrastructure and facilities and, all of the above. So that was a little, I think it was kind of contrarian by design, because we wanted to, kind of prove a point. And even the space we were in was probably the most boring, least exciting place to build a product and a business in multi-factor authentication. We got a lot of those. Okay, like, that's interesting, but doesn't, RSA own that market? We'd say, well, yeah, they do. But it's incredibly painful. And what we're seeing from customers is customers that are actually pulling these deployments out because of how much their end users are rejecting them, and that they're not bridging to the new environments of cloud. So we wanted to take a different approach, and I think that kind of flowed through all aspects of how we built our company and our product, all in the service of just delivering authentic security value that is really trying to solve some fundamental problems in computer security.
One of the things I love, Jon, about you, and also having got to know you over these past few months, is you are relentlessly humble. And the way you talk about that is with, humility, a lot of empathy for your customers. But Duo was radically successful, one of the most successful security startups of all time. You had an amazing exit, you built an amazing base of customers, but for me, you also changed, I think of it as you changed the face of security. You created a beloved brand within security. So I'm going to put you on the spot a bit here. I would love to hear, in your words, how do you think Duo changed the security industry over the past decade?
Yeah, I don't know if I hope we've had a lasting impact that will continue. Because that was our frustration starting off. Just so much of the past few decades of the security industry that has existed has been maybe kind of steeped in negativity. it's vendors that are spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's, security nihilism of like, you're already breached, what are you going to do? It's not a matter of if, but when. And it's like, wow, this is like pretty defeatist attitude for, an industry that's trying to just help our customers, modernize, digitize, still operate their businesses and be competitive. So there was, this sort of unhealthy landscape that we looked at with, and this fascination with nation state actors and threat hunting and attribution. And, maybe it's the Russian cozy bear actors that are attacking us, or maybe it's a teenage hacker in their basement. But either way, you need the same set of basic security controls to protect yourself. So, that was our, besides building a great business and solving, interesting problems for our customers, we kind of wanted to make a statement on how a security company could operate, could build a product, could treat their customers, and show that, like, if you do things the right way, you can still be successful. You don't have to ambulance chase. You don't have to, spread FUD. You can be authentic. You can be open. You can be approachable to your customers. And a lot of that, honestly, was, copying what was happening in enterprise SaaS. The trend of consumerization of IT, the trend of product-led growth. Those were, just things that hadn't been done in the security space. The fact that you could land on our website and sign up for a trial and kick the tires, see if it works in your environment, not talk to a sales rep, not fill out forms, not be qualified by a reseller, not have to sit through a demo or a webinar. It's just like, use the product. And if it works for you, plug in your credit card, and you can get from, our website to in production paying customer in, 10, 15 minutes. And that was a little incredulous to customers at the time. And, but, the proof was in the pudding. We delivered on that. We, showed our customers that this really critical security control of user authentication did not have to be incredibly painful, to manage, to deploy, or for your end user interactions.
I want to fast forward to today. A lot of progress has been made over the past decade plus in security. But unfortunately, it is still, FUD, as you describe it, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, is still very much alive and well in our industry. So I would love your perspective on, why are we still facing such threats within security of our organizations, of our companies, of ourselves? And what work do you think needs to be done in this next decade ahead?
Yeah, I mean, this podcast is 6 hours, right? Because we might need we might need the extended cut for this question. But as an industry, we've been building security for machines for decades. For networks and for infrastructure and for endpoints and data and so on. And I think what really changed in the past decade or so is that we started building security for people, which is a very challenging problem, but became the problem to solve. And it's not that, applications weren't being attacked or networks weren't being attacked, but it was a very different change in that, attackers had realized that people were the soft underbelly of organizations. And if I can, hijack Tim's credentials, then I have, I can ride over the existing legitimate paths of access for Tim to all the data and applications that I wanted to get into in the first place. So that was a big change. And, I think for your average end user, we're still not in a great state of security. We still have lots of security experts, and I'm doing air quotes on this audio podcast, telling users like, don't click on links and don't open attachments and, never plug things into your computer. Like that's why would you do that? That's crazy. That's what people need to do to use their computers. You can't run a company and tell your employees to be productive, but then tell them that they need like a PhD in cybersecurity to analyze hyperlinks before they click them on the internet. Like, it's not the job of users to solve this security problem. So, I think as an industry, we need to make computers safe to use by mere mortals and not have them, accidentally tripping into a pit of snakes when they're trying to, do email. So, certainly haven't solved these problems, but I tend to be a little bit of a security optimist. Like, I think we are making substantial progress in this area. Like, we have much harder, safer endpoints these days. You look to iOS, you look to Chrome OS, you look to Windows 11. We have a lot of promising, better methods of authentication that are out now and on the horizon with biometrics and things like WebAuthn and FIDO that will enable a passwordless experience for your average end user. And I think it is much easier to use a computer today and not fall into that, that snake bit than it was, 10 years ago. But certainly a lot more work to be done. We're not, on one hand, we're, I think, in a better place. On the other hand, the sort of dramatic adoption and digitization of our entire, economy, our society, our businesses, we're starting to see how those worlds intersect more and more, and how, whether cyber incidents or technology disruptions really do have an impact on, your average, person's daily lives.
And I wanted to double click on that point. I'm a huge believer in what you just said about it's time that we need, security needs to focus now on people. And the fact that we are trying to train people to filter phishing emails, but we didn't train people to filter spam email is a really kind of interesting situation we find ourselves in. I often hear this from security professionals, and I think it comes from a very good place. But there is a concern that actually solving the human problem in security isn't the job of technology. And I kind of challenge that, because I think technology has made our lives safer and avoided human error in there are many other examples. Like, we wear a seatbelt in a car, we have an airbag in a car, those kinds of things. But what's your perspective on that? Why do you think sometimes technology or the vendor solution can cause that kind of gag reflex for a security team who's thinking, well, maybe it's about more than just technology to solve this problem of the human factor? Have we tilted too much towards actually putting this on people?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm certainly very not in the camp of, like, blame the end user, as you might imagine, especially, like, in the workforce. Like, I truly believe, like, I mean, if you have, like, productive, well-motivated employees, then they are trying to do the best thing, within the constraints of their operating environments and their, incentives and so on. And, when your employees just want to be productive, that's a good thing. And, technology can help them be more productive and actually more happy. Like, how cool is it to, tell your user population that they can use the devices that they love, and the applications, the modern applications that they enjoy in their work life, and actually get shit done. And I think the challenges with security are more so kind of a lack of alignment in that philosophy. More often than not, you have security coming into that environment and actually making things more painful. I want to share a file and collaborate with my coworker, so why do I have to jump through a bunch of hoops and get on the VPN and send this via my internal SharePoint? Like, no one's going to do that. They're just going to fire it off via Dropbox or AirDrop or something. Like, so that's I think there's besides the technological challenge, there's sort of organizational challenges where, if you as an organization don't embrace your employees' use of, modern devices and applications, then you're kind of fighting I don't want to say it's unwinnable, but you're definitely fighting a battle against the tides, and honestly against the wrong enemy. Like, you're fighting against your users as opposed to the people that are trying to compromise your users, and generally building, the wrong kind of security program. And I think, my bias is maybe more towards the, your Netflix kind of paved path model of security. Like, how can you allow your employees to drive fast on the paved path and be productive? But you do need, you need some guardrails for when folks go, off-roading accidentally or intentionally. So I think there's, from an organizational standpoint, people that build security programs that operate in that model of like fast driving and guardrails versus checkpoints tend to move faster. And I think that, that principle extends even beyond security programs in organizations.
I wanted to go a little bit deeper on this concept of, future trends and where we might be headed next. And I thought a good question to ask you might be, what surprised you the most in building Duo? You were building over 10 years. The industry changed a lot in that time. Your company changed a great deal in that time. What were some of the things that really surprised you? For you and Doug, the things that you weren't expecting to see or weren't expecting to find out, or customers used your product in an unexpected way. What were some of those things you learned along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe the speed in which sort of cloud adoption and mobility happened was a little bit surprising. We were a SaaS, cloud hosted service from day one. But this was 2010, 2011, 2012, and so this was still early days, and we had a lot of customers that said, can you put Duo in a box? Kind of a self-hosted model. And I think it was surprising. We resisted that. We stayed kind of true to our beliefs. Some really challenging decisions there.
I was going to say the answer is always yes when someone asks you to put something in a box, right?
The
I'm joking,
obvious answer is yes, but when you have Morgan Stanley waving a 7-figure check around, and that's maybe 5 or 10x all the revenue that you've ever booked, it's hard to say no to that. And funny enough, it was actually one of our board members, Stratton Sklavos, who had joined our board in our A round. He'd also on the board of Salesforce, and we had actually started building some prototypes for this on-premise version. And he said, guys, like, you have to trust your gut here. And this conversation is exactly the one I had with, Mark Benioff years back with Salesforce and the whole, no software pitch there. And we thankfully we listened to Stratton, and we stuck to our guns. But I think we were pleasantly surprised with how quickly the different verticals and the industry came around to taking one of your most critical security controls and having it cloud hosted. And I think one of the key reasons for our success was because so much of access holistically, your cloud apps, accessing your VPN over the internet, was already happening remotely, already happening over the internet. So, worrying about whether, you had connectivity to the cloud was not a big deal if, all your other corporate applications were also down at the same time. So, we were able to, stick to where we thought technology was heading, and it did pay off big time. I think the other thing was just we had a thesis around the down market opportunity, and we had also a thesis on how we could, go up market into enterprise, just sort of, classical disruption model. And it was not surprising in hindsight, but it was surprising at the time how we were able to go bottoms up and sort of execute the same go-to-market, freemium experience, land and expand with some of your biggest companies in the world too, so that all the bones of the business that we built for the SMB market actually translated even into the enterprise market.
And was that because when you're building for an SMB audience, I guess the way I think about that is we often think about enterprise customers being the most demanding or the most difficult, but in some ways, SMB customers can be the most demanding or difficult because they are incredibly cost conscious. If they're not getting value from something, and if something isn't easy to use or easy to deploy, they just churn. What was it about that SMB motion that you think made Duo such a great product for the enterprise as well?
Yeah, I think there were commonalities. You might not have a security team down market. You definitely don't have a security team. You might have, a tenth of a person working on security. But those were shared challenges, like whether you're SMB, mid-market, enterprise organization, undoubtedly your security team is constrained by resources, constrained by talent and expertise, going through kind of challenging transformation in terms of your technology stacks. And, everyone wanted to deliver a positive end user experience, whether they're big or small. So a lot of those same kind of principles applied, whether you're 10 people or, 10,000 people. So that was a kind of early indicator that we could broaden the business and go after, more segments, more organizations. I'd also say just the buying behavior had changed so much in that the model of we want to kick the tires, we want to try it out, we don't want to sit through a demo. We want to understand whether it meets our needs and requirements and even see the pricing, before engaging more seriously with the company. Definitely played out. And we saw, we had one example. Facebook came into the company very early in 2011. And we didn't even know at the time because they signed up with a Gmail address. And, they called us up and said, hey, we're Facebook, we're using the product. And so we start scrambling like, what? Oh my gosh, how do we know this? And they signed up under a completely fake, and I won't repeat it here, but a vulgar name as their account name, because they didn't want to talk to anybody. They want to make sure it met their requirements. And they found out it did, and they said, okay, we're ready to pay you. So that kind of buying behavior changed, which I think is very, very obvious now across all types of enterprise IT. Of how can you disrupt that typical enterprise sales motion and get your product in deployment, sometimes in production, as quickly as possible. That will gain you the most traction and, take a maybe typically 9 to 12 month enterprise sales cycle and turn it into a, 3 to 6 month sales cycle.
That answer, that story you just shared about Facebook is probably the best answer to, you've got product market fit when blank. That is an amazing story. And of course, it doesn't happen at all often. We don't often get the opportunity to talk about company building on this podcast, but there'll be a lot of people who are listening to this show who are working in security and have their own idea for a product or a company or a service that they want to try and build a company around. What were the lessons learned, and what is your advice to entrepreneurs who are starting out and building a security company today?
Yeah, there's some common principles that may not be too surprising, but given that that we were building a business and a product for a vast sort of stretch of the market, your mom and pop coffee shop to your Morgan Stanley's to your federal government and so on. We have an incredibly diverse user population. And because we're building security for humans, we need to deeply understand the organizational cultures that they operate in and the constraints that they might have in their own environment. So, whether it's a healthcare worker who's maybe a nurse practitioner that's running back and forth between a patient's room and their nursing station, and previously they taped a hardware token to the monitor to have a shared login, or it's your, railway workers that are out in the field, barely able to use tablets because they have like massive, work gloves on, or it's your, your politician who's, in a Capitol building and their staff is helping them log into machines, or it's, the mom and pop coffee shop that the only reason they have security is because they accept credit cards and have a PCI burden. Like it is like, those are all like real things that we saw in the field with customers. And it is so hard to build technology that, whether it's security or anything, build software that addresses that diversity of needs. But that was a big focus for us. And how do we build a team that is representative of our end users? And not only because building a diverse team comes up with better ideas and better approaches, different backgrounds and perspective, but because we had to build a product for that diverse population. That was incredibly important for us. And I think from a team building perspective, from kind of the industry that we operate in and our location strategy as a company, being started and headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we took a different approach when it came to attracting talent and how the company operated. As an example, being in Michigan, there's not a lot of other VC-backed cybersecurity SaaS companies, at least in 2009. So we inherently had to hire, not for experience, but for aptitude. Folks that could come up to speed really quickly. Maybe they've never worked in security before. Maybe they have a little bit of, technology experience, but they're fast learners. And that was beneficial because that was the talent pool we were fishing in. Ann Arbor's all about learning, with the University of Michigan, top public institution in our backyard. And I think that actually created an advantage for us that we ended up leaning into and codifying in our cultural values. Because if we wanted to build a very different security company, hiring a bunch of people that were from the security industry and just repeating the same playbook of what they did at an RSA or a Symantec or a McAfee, like we're going to get the same kind of results as a RSA or a Symantec or McAfee, which is the exact opposite of the model of company that we wanted to build. So how we built our team and our talent strategy definitely tied into not only the customers we were serving, but also what we thought we needed to change about the security industry.
Jon, I'm sitting here smiling because you just mentioned something that I think anyone who knows about Duo or has met, anyone who's worked at Duo would really resonate with that concept of the values the organization held. There is, just this incredible culture, this incredible sense of, humility, kindness in so many people that worked at Duo. Could you tell us maybe a little bit more about those values you held as an organization, and again, how that translates into building security for people or securing people in companies today?
Yeah, we actually, a few years in, Doug and I codified, what our cultural values of the business should be. And, it's always an interesting exercise because you take a lot of maybe bad experiences you had at, past companies or, past professional lives. But then you also need to bring in like what's made us successful so far a few years into the company. And then what do we think will kind of create that flywheel of success going forward? And how do we, how do you take cultural values, which are kind of invisible under the waterline elements of your team, and bring them above the waterline and capture them in, rewards and recognition, in, stories and anecdotes, and actually in, operational use by your employees throughout the company. Because the values don't do anything if they're just on the wall somewhere. But if you could put them to use, they become, really, really powerful. And we started off with 3 culture values. One was engineering the business. And Doug and I are, engineers by trade, I guess. So we wanted to adopt a lot of engineering principles for how we built the business, like releasing early and often. Like, how do you iterate on your prototypes, whether you're building a software product, whether you're building, your financial modeling for the business, whether you're, running a new experiment in marketing to see how a new demand gen campaign will perform. We want to build that incrementalism and sort of orientation towards being iterative in how we built the business. And I think that played out very positively for us, because when you're going through the years of hypergrowth, tripling in revenue and doubling in headcount, the business changes so quickly that you have to operate incrementally. If you're adding a whole nother half of the team every year, then a lot of the things that you designed a year ago might be obsolete next year. And you need to think about what's going to scale, what's going to break if we 10x some part of the business. And how do we continue to take a healthy amount of risk? How do we run experiments? How do we have a hypothesis? How do we practice the scientific method all around the business, which led us to our second cultural value of learning together. Like when we make bets, or we take risk, or we perform some, software release or marketing event, or, a sales conversation, how do we make sure that we learn, even if it's just a small amount, from each interaction that we have? And we bring that learning, not just from an individual standpoint, but we bring that learning back to our team so we collectively can get smarter. And I think that was a big part of our success. And, we would operationalize that through things like retrospectives. Like every time we held a field marketing event, the team would come back and they do a retrospective. They do a stop, start, continue. And they'd say, hey, we did that. It worked great. We got some leads, but here's some things that, might work better next time. Or here's some things that worked really well that we want to explicitly capture, that we want to continue. Because we're going to do 100 of these things this year. We're going to do 200 of them next year. We're going to do 400 of them the year after. And we probably should be getting better each time. And we probably should be teaching, the rest of the team of what's working in the business, so we have a shared understanding of that. And the last cultural value we had was being kinder than necessary, which was a little bit of a Midwest thing. But I think it had a really big impact it's probably the most memorable cultural value of Duo if you asked an average employee. Because life is too short to, tolerate jerks or assholes. So there definitely was a, no brilliant jerks policy, that you might be the smartest person in the room or in the world, but like, if you can't play well with others, if you don't have good, kindergarten skills, then it's not going to work out. Because we're a team, we're an organization, we're a kind of living, breathing organism that has to collaborate together, on behalf of our customers. And, that message of being kinder than necessary, I think really resonated, where it's not just about, not pointing fingers and assuming positive intent, but it's actually caring for each other as employees and helping each other out, either personally or professionally. So we would see, some of those aspects help build a sales culture where we see, AEs and SEs that are like helping each other out on deals. They have no incentive to do that. There's nothing in their comp plan that tells them to do that. But then you have a team selling culture that, when everybody's winning, it's great. And then last but not least, we did add a fourth value about building for the future a few years later in the company. And that was sort of codifying our experiences with, kind of sticking with cloud instead of on-prem, as well as making sure that our company knew that, our plan was to build something that was very enduring. And while quarterly goals are important and annual goals are important, like this was not we did not want our company to have short-term thinking. So it was always thinking about, what's going to happen 5-6 years down the road, not what's going to happen, 5 or 6 months down the road. And when we make decisions, whether it's how we build our product or how we sell to our customers, we want to be thinking long-term. And that's very important in SaaS. We had a culture in our sales organization of like only quality revenue. If you sell, organization a deal that's not qualified or not our sweet spot for what our product can do, or promising things that aren't on the truck, it's going to churn next year. And that's not good for anybody. So we always wanted to make sure that we were really understanding our customers' needs, and if we couldn't satisfy them, that was okay, but that we really took good care of them and could stand behind that and say, if you go with us, you will be successful, without a doubt. And I still remember, our sales kickoffs where, we'd stand up on stage and put a big 0 up on the slide, because that was the number of deals that we ever regret taking. And I still think that's the case today. I can't think of a single customer where it's like, wow, I wish we hadn't have closed that deal, or wow, that went completely sideways. And that's, I think that all those values kind of helped us grow through kind of the messiness of going from, 10 to 100 at a breakneck speed, but then also kind of set us up well for scale, beyond 100 plus.
Jon, thank you so much for your time today. I think that value that you mentioned, and so many of us know Duo for, being kinder than necessary, is an amazing jump off point for this podcast. And it brings it full circle with what you said at the beginning, building security for the people. It's been so good to have you on the show today. Before you go, we tried to get to know the humans on the Human Layer Security podcast a little bit better by asking some quick fire questions. So what is the best book you've ever read?
I think best book is a impossible question to answer in terms of best book ever. But given this is a security podcast, I do have a recent favorite that's relevant to the space, and that's Active Measures by Thomas Rid, which is a great history of a topic that we are struggling with as a society today, of disinformation and where that originated and how it's evolved over time. And I will say also, the kids, I've got a 5-year-old and 3-year-old, they are really enjoying the M is for Malware kid book. So they're learning all of the cybersecurity so they can help daddy stop the bad hackers as well.
That is very cool. I've not heard of any security books for children, but we'll add links to both of those in the show notes. Jon, what is your favorite city in the world?
That is also a tough one. I'm not, maybe from these questions, I'm not one for extremes. I would have to say Ia in Santorini, one of the Greek islands. It is so beautiful and serene, and there's not many places in the world that I would visit twice, but that might be just the one.
And final question, your diary is cleared for the day. What do you do?
Oh, that one's easy. I would listen to this podcast just on a repeat, just binge listen to this podcast, of course.
I think we almost have enough episodes now as well to fill a full day. So that's a good.
That's my normal day too. That's even if my schedule is full, I just put this on in the background as soothing music. But in reality, maybe spend time with family and hop on the Peloton, maybe read M is for Malware, another book.
That's awesome. Jon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. This has been fun. No problem. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks.
Cool. All right.
Bye.
Bye. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening. We'll be back with more human layer security insights in our next episode. But if you can't wait that long, you can visit our blog at tessian.com/blog, where you'll find lots of amazing content, advice, and tips. And if you enjoyed our show, please rate and review it on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.